Hi everyone. It's the middle of a Saturday afternoon. You wouldn't believe it because it's grim. But I have finally managed to get round to getting the third major DAW, which is on iPads, which is Cubasis, which rounds out the trio of Garageband, Cubasis, and Auria Pro. In today's video, we're going to look specifically at Cubasis and what it can do, what it can't do. In separate videos, we're going to look at the synths in Cubasis. In another video, I'm going to look at the synths in Auria. I think I already covered GarageBand, but I might make another video on that if I can go in any more depth. Then we're going to do a versus video, which is all three of them against each other. So, there's plenty to be getting on with. Now, I didn't even really drink that coffee. Anywho, I'm recording the iPad through the screen on the Mac, which is something I've also done a video on. If you want to watch it, the link will be on my channel, and hopefully I'll be able to put that at the end of this video. So half of what you're going to see today is going to be the screen with me probably in the corner as just a chatty little man. Anyway, this came with several demo projects. So if we open the media button, which is in the top left, you should find that there's on and on. New project from demo. Oh, so those are templates, right. So this Lucky 7 is a demo that came with Cubasis. Now, if you look on the left-hand side of this, oh, you can make this bigger to see more. That's nice and useful. I didn't find that before. You can look in all your audio, which you can import audio into Cubasis. This is a track that's actually a voiceover for the Marshall Blonde review that I did, which was in... Oh, I'll show you that later. So there's the MIDI where you can have MIDI files that you drop in, including a lot of grooves and loops that come with it, which would be quite useful if you're not a drummer and you just want a loop to go into the drum kits. The instruments is actually the presets for each set, like VSTI instrument, or however they decide to refer to them. There's Microsonic, which is kind of like an FM sampler. There's Mini Sampler, which is a literal sampler, and Microlog, which is more like a Moog, Mini Moog Model D. You've got your projects. You can create a mix down here by going to Mixdown, just clicking Create Mixdown, and that will give you options, which rather nicely includes FLAC, which I'm really quite impressed with. Oh, FLAC Mixdown will create a 16-bit audio file. Well, that's slightly disappointing, but not unexpected. That's fine. Include effect tails, a nice little choice. Mixdown between locators, so I can actually use the L&R locators at the top there and decide which part of the track I want to export, which is something I do all the time if I want to export, say, just a chorus or just a verse or whatever. Create separate files for tracks. That sounds to me like another way of saying stems, and I find that incredibly useful because that means that I can then export the separate tracks into another DAW, maybe a desktop DAW, like kind of Pro Tools or Logic. So if I've written a song and I've got all separate parts, I can export them as WAV files and mix them later on. And then trash, apparently if you delete things, Cubase doesn't delete them, which isn't great for file space, but if you've got a larger space on your iPad, like 100 to 128 gig, that's not an issue, and it could be quite useful in saving you when you go, no, I didn't mean to delete that. There it is. So that's the media. Let's just close that. So what you'll see straight away is if I try and pinch zoom the tracks in the main section, I can only go wide ways. If I have to be over the track numbers and names over here to make them bigger and smaller, which is quite annoying. But it's single finger swipe up and down, and you don't have to do two finger. Two finger will just do pinch for zoom. If you make them big enough, suddenly the mute and solo buttons appear, the M and S, which is exactly how I used to use Cubase. When I finished university, they taught us how to use Cubase SX2 and SX3, which, to be honest, the feature set in this isn't that much reduced from Cubase SX3. I mean, yes, they're on Cubase 9 now, but in terms of a mobile system, they're kind of, yeah, they're sticking to the guns with the old stuff, by the look of things. So this demo came with Cubasis, and it's got 13 tracks in it. I've already been messing around with it, but if I hit play, it's useful. It's good to use to try and get used to destroying things and finding out what buttons do what, because that's kind of how I learn a DAW. I don't know about you guys, but I literally bring up a project or a copy of a project that if I destroy it, it doesn't matter, and then I just press the everything until I've found what I need, which is just press every button. So I started with the drum kit. So if I solo the drum kit, now the first thing is on the left, all these tabs have changed. So if I hit rock key, oh, it seems to have changed the spelling. If I click on each of these tabs, it drops them down. So the MIDI, I can actually choose a MIDI port coming in, which is a very nice, easy way to do this. If I had a MIDI keyboard attached to the iPad, then here I would just choose that as the MIDI, and then we're off, and then I'll get that sound from that instrument coming through and I can record live. Pretty useful. Below that is MIDI output as well, which is a very easy way from Cubasis, which I was finding more difficult with the other DAWs, to send the MIDI out to a MIDI keyboard, which again, you'd need a separate MIDI out, but apparently you can do that through network sessions and virtual MIDI, and also the stereo outputs. One thing that I'm seeing that's quite limiting here is that I can choose all these separate stereo outputs, but they're all disabled because as of right now, I've not got an interface plugged into this with multiple outs. It's just the 1 and 2, which means I can't even use these as kind of virtual outputs, which I'll come on to later. There are no groups in Cubasis, no folders, no busing, no routing, apart from just master out, which is really, really annoying and means that I can't mix, say, an entire drum bus from separate drums, or I can't group the guitars together and process that, or all the vocals and process all the vocals together. Let's move on to the instrument tab. So for rock kit, we've got attack and release, which I've not changed, but next to it is the drum icon, and that opens the drum kit. So this is microsonic. I'm not going to go into too much depth with microsonic, but if I hit play, the left and right for rock kit, I can just change the kit. And what is quite useful in here is where it says monophone preview. I can hit these little pads here, so I know instantly what some of this kit is going to sound like, and I've got a good idea of whether it's going to work in my mix or not. So let's just close that down for now. Insert effects, that's where it gets interesting. These insert effects are going to be the same on any channel, so I may as well talk about them here. So the channel strip and studio EQ you'll see here, they are fixed. They don't go anywhere. They are part of Cubasis. They're integral. The only thing that you can do is the little up-down button. You can change the order that they go in. This tiny little up-down kind of thing. So for this particular track, and most of the time the way that I work, the channel strip would come first. So let's hit the E, which if you've ever used Cubase or anything like that, E, this button is kind of edit, which brings up all the controls for a plugin or a routing option or anything. If you see an E anywhere, that pretty much means all the details, all the stuff is under this. Press this button if you want to get changing everything. And the channel strip's actually quite powerful. It looks a lot like an SSL channel strip to me. So it's comprised of 4 sections. Let's have them all bypassed and do them one by one. So there's a cut filter section, which is exactly what it says, low cut and high cut. So low cut does exactly what it says, and then high cut does the same thing as well. So there's a noise gate, which Cubasis's noise gates have always confused me. The state lights never quite seem to work how I would expect them to. So let's try that. I mean, you can hear there that something's happening with that gate. You can hear it's gating, but the state lights don't do anything. Oh, I saw them do something once. So the range knob makes it more like an expander than a gate, so it doesn't completely kill it. And the sidechain, if we listen to the sidechain, can make... Let's have a listen to the sidechain. So with the sidechain, you can just pick the most strong frequency of the trigger that you want to trigger the gate, and hit play again. Okay, so I'm not the biggest fan of the noise gate. I'm going to try my best not to use it. I'm not a big fan of noise gates anyway, unless it's something very extreme like metal toms or something. Generally, I try and not do that. The compressor is quite decent. It's very clean. Again, the green lights for reduction don't quite work as I would have thought they should. So let's hammer it. Okay, so I'm not going to go into too much depth about how a compressor works right now. It should be fairly obvious, but one thing that's really bugging me with this is the reduction lights are going the wrong way. As I smash the compressor, the reduction is less when it should be more, which makes no sense. And then there's the saturator. Now I really, really like the saturator. It's got 2 types, tape or tube, and the EQ knobs do slightly different things. Now, the saturator I've been using on almost every channel. With the tape drive, what I like to do with tracks is I like tape drive, so I'll really hammer the tape drive. Now, the EQ low on the tape drive starts at 0. It can either affect slightly more or slightly less low end, but the high end is more of a shelf because tape kind of takes some of the ultra high end away. And then there's a gain at the bottom because the drive on the tape machine will make everything louder, so you can bring the gain down to match. So if I hit bypass while it's playing to turn it on and off, should be able to hear a difference. So it's really quite heavy saturation, but it's not a compressor in the strictest sense. It's giving me a fatness, and it's bringing all the elements up like a heavily driven tape machine would. Whereas the tube mode is more of a distortion, but a subtle distortion. So as you can hear, you do lose some of the hit and the smack on the drums. The downside here is with it being kind of basic Cubasis, there's no dry wet, so I can't just blend the original hit back in. So maybe that's something that Steinberg could add in a later revision. I'd really like to see that. So the studio EQ is a parametric EQ. which I use in every major DAW. They've all got one of these somewhere. Maybe Garageband's got one, but this is quite powerful. Like that lump there, that's 24 decibels. That is way too much, but that means that the power is there. You can see how, because that's got adjustable Q and adjustable frequency and goes quite a lot, 24 dB both ways, you really can use that to fix frequency problems. And that could be really great in the field if you've got a really good sound apart from one whistling frequency. Like say you're recording an electric guitar and it's just got that awful kind of going on in the high end. You can just dip a little bit of that out when you find it and not need to go to something like Pro Tools to find a solution. Now after the studio EQ, that's where it gets interesting, because there are 3 slots here, only 3, no more no less, where you can add another effect in line. Now you can add audio units. I don't currently have any audio units. Into App Audio. So that's where I would put something like bias effects in. Apparently I'm using that on Ascend, but I'll have to have a look at that another time. But that's where, if you were recording heavy guitars, you would put something like bias amp or bias effects in here, and unfortunately that means you wouldn't be able to use the channel strip and studio EQ. So again, this is something that I'd like to see Steinberg look at, is maybe you could have one of the inter-app audios before the channel strip and studio EQ, because that's the way a lot of people are going now with virtual guitars, that kind of thing. But let's just say, let's go back out of inter-app audio. And it comes with a reverb, a delay, which I would usually use as sends, not inserts. I could have another copy of the studio EQ. There's a shelf EQ, which is exactly what it says. It can just shelve up or down some bass or some treble, nice and simple. There's a preview as well, which is quite nice. Which, the preview seems to just strike a MIDI note, or if it's on an audio channel, it starts playing from the very start of the audio that you're hovering on. And it just gives you an idea of what all your effects are doing. So there's the compressor, which we've already got open, and that's a secondary compressor. So you can see how I'm taking a decibel off there. I'm just kind of clipping the tops, but the attack is in percentage rather than in milliseconds, which is quite annoying, as is the release, which means I can only use my ears and try and hit and hope for the best. What else have we got here beyond the compressor? There's a limiter, which looks exactly the same as the compressor, but with no ratio. It's just yes. There's noise gate, which is a separate noise gate, but because that can't go before the EQ and everything, again, I would put a noise gate first before doing things like compression. And if they're including this because the channel strip noise gate isn't good enough, why would this have to go afterwards? It's just something that's worth thinking about. There's spin effects. This is weird. This is all kind of like Ableton-y style, kind of Korg or Chaos pad type stuff. If I hit play on this, you'll see I can hold buttons down. I think I would have to record automation with this to make it do anything kind of permanent, but if you watch. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, so it's got all those kind of cool, gimmicky kind of effects that you might use once in a while, but on their own, unless I was playing them live, I'd have to find where the automation is, which there I can see R and W, which again is classic Cubase, where the automation is not engaged by default. So what you would have to do, we'll come back to that in a minute. So there's a filter which does exactly what I was doing before. There's a chorus, flanger, phaser. There's an amp sim, but oh, that was nice. That was unexpected. Well, that's quite interesting. They've got their own amp sims, and I'll have to try them at some point. But I could just use them as kind of a distortion-y, grungy type effect. Interesting. I'll come back to that. So there's an overdrive, which I'm not a big fan of separately. It just seems to remove all character by just being a literal overdrive. There's a phase inverter which has no controls, because that is exactly what it says. And there are 2 effects packs. That is to say, there's tape delays, stereo delays, pans, tremolos, bit reduction, stuff that I might look at in the future, but right now, seeing as though they're extra money, I'll come back to that. So yeah, you can have 3 extra effects, and they have to go after the channel strip and studio EQ, which for me is quite limiting. Then there's send effects, and you can only have 3 send effects. So let's, I seem to have accidentally put bias effects in here as one of the 3 sends, and I can't find a way to get rid of it. Oh, let's just put it on. There we go. So there's the reverb, which if I absolutely crank the reverb so you can hear it, I've put a big pre-delay on, which is useful that they've added it. The only controls, you get how bright it is, the time it takes, and how much there is of it in the mix for that send, which if it's a send, that should be 100%. And for the delay, there is very little. There is literally, is it a dot? Is it dotted? Is it triplets? What speed is it? How much feedback do you want? That's it. That's all you get. And it's a digital delay that's straight down the middle. And if you want more, you're going to pay for it. So I think that seems to be fairly standard if I just hit the delay pretty hard. Yeah, that is literally it. I mean, it works. It's not incredible. There's automation, which is that you can open the automation editor. This is where it gets really powerful with Cubase. Let's just quickly look at the channel before we do. So the channel has mute and solo, read and write for automation, and a fader. And you can choose a colour, which is rather nice. It means that you can see all your banks of what's what, but it's nothing particularly special. So let's go back to the automation editor. Let's just say that we wanted, track 1 inserts. We can change pretty much anything on any of these at any one time. So we can, even including all the send. So what track are we on? Yeah, so I can change the send level from this track. So this is automation for everything, not just for this track then, which means everything's in one place. So there's volume, pan and mute for the master volume. So you can change pretty much any automatable setting. Although why it's still coming up over the rock kit, I do not know. So let's just do the volume of this. So if I hit right, which is at the bottom, hello, don't know what that button did. So let's go back to the automation, put it on right. Oh, that's right, as soon as a track is on right mode, you can change anything. So let's draw in some volume here. So the volume's now, oh, let's just redraw that much louder. And then hit that playback. The automation is on write mode. So if I do this, and then turn write mode off, let's look at the automation again. And you can see with the big black lines there, if I hit play, that is exactly what I just put in by using my hands and getting a feel for it, which if you're the kind of person where you feel that your automation should be you, it should be your hands, it should be felt, there it is. That's exactly what I think you'd be after. So you can reduce the numbers, yep, to keep it simple. Oh, maybe not overdo that. So there's an undo button and undo again, yep. So if I reduce the number of points, so it's clickable, draggable, is it? No. Oh, I can move where the whole thing is. Move up and down. Yeah, so if it's white, it's selected. Right, okay. So I can change and move a single point, which is where reduced points becomes useful, because I can just take one point and just do that with it. So you can leave that more human feeling, or you can reduce the number of points, which also means that you can be more specific. Reset all, yep, that does exactly what it says. Okay, so there's a lot to go at. Now, if I hit pads at the top, that's also quite useful. If you're used to using an Akai MPC, there's all your pads. The latency on this is kind of terrible, but that's because I'm recording through the Mac and not because of the actual software. Whereas if I go to, there's a synth called Transsaw. The keys is literally keys, so it's muted right now, which is... That's quite a distorted sound on purpose, so don't worry about that. But yeah, you get your full keys with a pitch bend and sustain pedal, which if you've plugged in a MIDI keyboard with a sustain pedal, I'm sure that would do its thing. Here's something interesting. The numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Instant chords, which means that if you're not particularly kind of music theory based, if you don't want to be going and working out complex chords, you can just hit those numbers. So that's pretty useful. So I've still got that overdrive on, yeah. So very nice. Makes life a little easier having that little strip of keys. Now let's quickly fly through the setup options. I mean, it sounds dull, but there is stuff in here. Like the bit resolution here was at 16-bit, and I've changed it to 24. The sample rates, Cubasis can do 44.1, 48, and 96, but there's a catch. If you use 48 and 96, you can't use inter-app audio, and it actually tells you as much. It asks you if you want to convert all your files. If I use 46 or 98, you can convert what you already have. You're going to lose some quality, but if you really want to continue working in a different sample rate and you've already recorded one thing, it's possible, and there it is. Let's have a look at the arranger. So low waveform quality doesn't mean low audio quality, it literally just means that it can spend less processing time drawing these things rather than the high detail. I like the high detail, and I'm on a Pro iPad, so it should be able to keep up with me there. Unfreeze, because there is a freeze function, which is right there. So if I freeze, that's actually rather quick. So if I'm running low on processor space, I can just freeze a track, but it takes all the settings away with it. So I'll just unfreeze that because that's not... Oh, wrong button. Oh. Yep, so if I unfreeze, what's it saying there? It's been modified, the changes are lost and it may sound different, fine. Arm selected track is something that always annoyed me in Cubase. I want to arm tracks when I decide and not when it decides. But it's nice that they've given me the option. Polyphony. Hardware latency was at low by default and I've changed it to ultra low so it's got lower inbuilt latency. Bluetooth AirPlay is really nice because that means that it's currently on system capture, but if I have a Bluetooth receiver in my home stereo, which I do, that means that I can preview a mix through the stereo without having to route a cable across the room and trip the misses up and do damage, or generally just upset people. And where it says audio device, it just says iPad microphone, but when you plug in an interface, I would imagine it's there, just to let you know. MIDI, you can choose a set output latency, either forward or back. So if you've got a MIDI keyboard that either has inbuilt latency or for some reason your interface is causing a latency, you can twitch it. You can send a MIDI clock out, so as I hit play here, if I've got a project receiving MIDI clock on another machine that's also being synchronized, that can be sent through a MIDI channel. MIDI over Bluetooth, that sounds really, really useful to me. Mostly because MIDI over Bluetooth, to me, means that I could have a MIDI keyboard, just a tiny little thin one in my bag, and not have to plug everything in all the time. If I just have an idea while, let's say you're a touring musician, let's say you do 8-hour drives regularly from venue to venue. That's a lot of time, but say you're doing something else on the tour bus and you get an idea, you can pull out your iPad quick, Cubasis, keyboard on, go, and just tap away and not have to get interface, dongle, not have to get USB hub, not have to, if you can just go Bluetooth, go, play. I know that there are a lot of guys out there who would much rather play a physical instrument, but that time of setup can be really inconvenient. I know I think the CME X-Key Air is a Bluetooth keyboard. There must be more than one. And that's pretty useful as it is. Velocity sensitive pads. I don't tend to like that myself. Not that I don't like velocity sensitivity, but because there is no velocity sensitivity in this and it's using kind of software to work it out, quite often I find it gets it wrong. Metronome has a pre-count. You can choose how loud it is between normal, which is actually known as 50%, and Irma Gerd deafening. I'll turn that on for a second. It's the classic Cubase. Completely unmissable. Beep, boop, 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 beep, boop. You can choose what outputs it goes through if you have multiple outputs, which is great because that means if you're running a multi-channel interface off this and you've got a drummer listening in, but you've also got the singer listening in, the singer doesn't have to have the annoying deep doop 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 if they don't want, which is really useful in kind of a live situation. You can have an M4A bitrate chooser, which I'm going to choose a higher one. FLAC compression, you can choose, because there's FLAC output, which is quite rare, and I really quite appreciate this, that it's FLAC is free lossless audio, which means small files, but with no quality loss. I'm a big Reaper user, and Reaper uses FLAC as well. Or it can use FLAC. If you go for a higher compression level, it takes longer to do the export, but you get slightly smaller file sizes. Now this button, I've saved the best till last. The Wi-Fi server. If I turn this on, it just gives me a local address with a port on it. So if I copy that exact number with that colon in to any other computer that's on this local network, so on the same Wi-Fi or just basically in the same house on the same network, I can bring up a window. I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. So it'd be HTTP // 192.168.1.31 and that comes up in the browser, which you can't see very clearly, and all the images seem to be broken, which is weird. But I can see the audio, the instruments, the MIDI, the mixdown projects, and that means I can back everything up. I can copy files straight into Cubasis. I can take mixdowns and parts that I've recorded straight out of it with a single click. There's even a search, apparently, search for files. Yeah, so I can put a name in there and I can search. So that's how I got that other extra file on there. Now that is very, very useful. And that means that that also works with any other computer. It doesn't matter what your operating system is. Your other computer could be Linux for all it cares, which is fantastic. It could be OS X, could be Windows. As long as it can bring up an Internet Explorer browser and it's got space to download and upload the files, that's it. Simple. And I think that is probably worth the admission price alone. There are things I'd like to see in Cubasis, some slightly more advanced features, like if I bring up the mixer, you can see the E for edit for every track, which is nice. There's input monitoring, which again is useful in the right situation, but if I input monitor, that's defaulted to using the inbuilt microphone, which is quite annoying. But at the end we have stereo out. There's I can put master inserts in. Fantastic. So there's a brick wall limiter. Oh, I've only just found this. So make the release as fast as possible. So I can put a decibel's worth of brick wall limiting on the output just to make sure it doesn't clip. That's really nice. So if I go... It's good, babe. Sorry about the interruption there. Got a call to make a booking for the studio, which reminds me, if any of you would like to come into our recording studio to do some work with us, send me a message through Facebook at Hot Pole Studios, or send me a message through YouTube, or have a look on our website, hotpolestudio.co.uk, and we can talk about what we can do for you and how we can help. So let's just wrap this up quickly, because that is a typical thing of Cubase, in my opinion, that I didn't even know that was there until I went digging and found in the mixer window the tiny little E, and that's the only place I've been able to see this. But it does mean that I can have all the effects. I'm not seeing a channel strip anywhere, but I can have something like what's the interrupt? Final Touch, which is the mastering plugin. I could have Final Touch in if that'll load. That may be something for another day, integrating into App Audio, because I find it's quite kind of finicky. Sometimes it wants to work, sometimes it doesn't want to work. It's still kind of in its infancy, I find. Yeah, audio error. Yeah. Launch the app from the home screen first. Let's do that. Oh. Crashy. Yeah, so I find that inter-app audio is still a bit funny, but all in all, having the mixer on the same screen as your tracks is something that you can't do in Auria, which is great. Having the media window be relatively simple is also a good thing, in my opinion. Let's just see with the MIDI. If I select a MIDI part, nope. I was going to ask find the undo button. If I could just drop that in No, I can't drop that in as a MIDI part in the library. That would be really useful if I could just save a part that I'd done and then drop it in another track. Because not being able to do that could be a bit of a pain. Maybe you can... Oh, yeah. Maybe you could do something to do with saving a MIDI file, but that's becoming quite laborious when I could just drop and go. So there's a lot to be getting on with. So this is more powerful than Garageband, I think, although the inbuilt instruments aren't quite as intuitive, but it's nowhere near as powerful as Auria in terms of Auria's more complex, but we'll get into absolute details of a Versus at some point soon. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe to the channel. That's really appreciated. If you hit the sub button, even if you never watch another one of our videos, it really helps us. Also, check out our Patreon page. Everything that we do is helped by Patreon because that helps a very, very huge amount. It helps me take the time to do this rather than working in the studio with clients so I can get more videos made. And check out the other videos that are on screen. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.